All right, well, why don't we have a look at getting going on things, although I'm in a funny view on my screen here for some reason. There we go, now I got it. So welcome everybody. It is a rare fifth Tuesday of a month, but we appreciate you coming back for the fifth Tuesday of June. Glad to have you here. I'm in Dallas, Texas, where we are once again closing down our shops and bars and restaurants, but hopefully for good reason this time, and maybe the last time. But we are still expecting SMU students to start returning. Some student athletes have already done so, so the more the better, as long as the safety protocols stay in place, which seem to be fairly significant here in Dallas. So I'm excited about that and hope that all of you are taking care of each other and those around you on your day-to-day life measures. My name is Peter Davis, and I am a professor in the Sport Management Master's Program at SMU. And if this is your first visit with us, appreciate you being here. But I also recognize from registrations, we do have a number of returning folks. So thank you for joining us again, and thank you for sharing the word. And that goes for all of you. After today's presentation, if you'd like to share a piece, a part of the entire presentation, we are recording, and we will make that available to you through the snodgrasspartners.com website, where there'll be an easy link to go. And check this one out, but you can also check out the other 4 we've already done, and for that matter, we've got another 4 to come. So this is kind of our midpoint, and it's been going really well. We've got hundreds of unique users or views that have taken place, so keep spreading the word. We're getting good information out. I hope you're getting great feedback from what you're watching, and please know that we encourage your questions and answers throughout the conversation today, and certainly beyond. If there's a question that comes up later, you can reach out to me, and I'll share my information and everybody's information here at the end today. But reach out to us at any time if we can assist in any way, if that's just a quick answer of a question or there's a larger conversation to be had. And you can learn a little bit more about what Snodgrass Partners does when you're on their website looking for the recordings as well. Lots of good work going on in the athletics industry, and certainly the intercollegiate side of things, which is really relevant to a lot of folks on the line today. So through the first couple of seminars, we've dealt with a varying degree of topics, and some of them have been in the weeds, really understanding the details of some things, like our NCAA academic conversation with John Schuke at Forward Progress. But today we kind of get to flip that switch and go to the other end of the spectrum a little bit and fly at a very high altitude. To help us strategically approach our companies, our teams, and our own jobs as individuals. So there's so much going on right now. It's really simple to get caught up in all of the information, or the information of the day, if you will. There's something new every day that seems to take the lead. And more times than not, I've noticed it contradicts whatever was said the day before, but that's all right. So that also tells you that the spigot of information is open wider than it ever has been. And I even think back, still in an internet day, I'm not going to go back too far, but you go back 15, 20 years, we thought that was about as much information as we were going to be able to handle. And, today is so far beyond what anybody ever expected, I think. I'm sure there were a few that expected it. But so the question starts to become, how in the world are we supposed to keep up? How are we supposed to stay in the game, let alone ahead of the game? And today's guest has some great insight for you on that and the importance of focus and prioritization. Larry Bonfante is joining us from New York, just north of New York City in West Nyack, New York, where he's the founder and leader of CIO Benchcoach. Larry serves his clients on an individual executive coach basis through he's a strategic voice of reason, and then certainly as a high-level business consultant as well. He's an accomplished author of 2 books and a workshop leader who's worked with a myriad of companies, including little-known places like the USTA and the NFL and Amazon and Toyota, Cisco, Salesforce, some great organizations that he's working with, and he's done so both in the domestic and the international forum. So the information he's got for you to listen to today is spot on. It's high level, but extraordinarily important from where I sit. And I would encourage you, as we go through this today, ask questions and get involved with the conversation. There is a Q&A. There's a Q&A button somewhere at the bottom of your page. If you mouse over the screen, it'll pop up. I can take a look at that and make sure that we're taking a look at those questions and answers. And if we don't get to everything today, we can certainly get back to you if that's helpful to you. I can message you as we're going and let you know that we're not going to be able to fit in or whatever it is. So please do throw your questions out to us. And with that, let me stop the screen share here. Say hello to Larry. And Larry, let me hand you the trackpad, so to speak, and introduce CIO Benchcoach for us and yourself and what you're doing for clients.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. It's a pleasure to be with you and a pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with the rest of the team this afternoon. I've spent 35 years in corporate America as an IT executive. The last 15 years of my career, I was the CIO for the United States Tennis Association. I'm sure you folks are very aware of the USTA and the work that we did there. For the last 3 years, I've full-time been in my own executive coaching practice, where I've worked with over 350 individual executives, as well as with thousands of people who have attended my workshops and presentations, focusing on what I call the competencies in human dynamics: how to partner with people, how to communicate with people, how to develop collaborative relationships with people, how to get things done at a human level. Because quite frankly, what I found in my 35 years of career, it wasn't that people lacked the technical or functional skill set to be effective. It was those human dynamics that were challenging for many people. So I do both executive coaching on a one-on-one basis, group mentoring. I do workshops, I do keynote presentations, consulting engagements, and everything in between. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about prioritization and focus. And I'm telling you that through the lens of both the 350 people I've worked with, the thousands of people I've had in my workshops, as well as my own experiences in 35 years in corporate America. So I'm going to kind of start my presentation and share with the team. And let me just, I gave you a little bit of a background on myself. And let me tell you a story on why focus and prioritization is so critically important. And I am a storyteller. I'll warn you that in advance. My wife tells me that all the time, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't mean it as a compliment. But
she may.
Right. But stories are illustrative. And before I accepted the role as CIO at the USTA, I had verbally accepted the offer for the job, and I had not signed any documentation, so there was no formal offer. And 10:30 on a Friday night, my cell phone goes off. Now I'm of Italian descent, and if you're of Italian descent, if the phone goes off at 10:30 in the evening, your first thought is, who died? Okay, so at 10:30 in the evening, I'm picking up my phone and wondering who's calling me at this hour. And it was our former CFO at the USTA telling me that she needed me to be down in Marco Island, Florida the next morning, and there was a plane ticket waiting for me at LaGuardia Airport. So I didn't get much more information than that. I packed a suit bag, went down to the Marriott in Marco Island, went to check in at the front desk, and the woman at the front desk said to me, "I'm sorry, Mr. Bonfante, you can't check in yet. They're waiting for you in Salon A." And I thought to myself, well, who's waiting for me in Salon A, and what are they waiting for me to do? So I went to Salon A, dropped my Samsonite suit bag, knocked on the door, and was told to come in, and I walked into the board of directors meeting. My first second in front of USTA was in front of the board of directors. Our former CEO and president at the time, Merv Heller, God rest his soul, passed a couple of years ago, stood up, shook my hand, and said, "Larry, welcome to the USTA. IT is a black hole where money goes in and nothing of value ever comes out." He introduced me to our secretary treasurer, who shook my hand and handed me an Excel spreadsheet. And I turned to him, I said, "Jim, it's a pleasure to meet you. Could you tell me what this Excel spreadsheet is?" He said, "Well, this is your severance budget. You need to fire everyone. There's no one worth keeping." So that was my introduction to the USTA. So needless to say, what I inherited was probably the most dysfunctional organization I had ever seen. And there were hundreds of problems. But one of the things that was critical to me in succeeding in turning things around was to have the focus of what were the priority things that we needed to turn around. Because when you have hundreds of data points coming in your peripheral vision from every angle, it's very easy to get distracted, and you have to understand what are the priorities for your organization, what really matters, and what are the things that are going to make a difference. So that's what we're really going to talk a little bit about today, is the things that make a difference. This is just me, a bad picture of me. That's what I look like, unfortunately. So it's not that the picture is bad, it's that my face is bad. But that just gives you a little bit of a background on who I am and where I'm coming from. You can learn more about me at your leisure. So the first thing I want to talk about, every success in life starts with a vision. And in order for that vision to be successful, it needs to be inspiring. And I spent 10 years at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals from 1990 to 2000. And during my tenure there, I was with the corporate IT function, and we brought in Accenture to transform our organization. And this was before the word transformation was as commonplace as it was today. Matter of fact, we were told it was a business transformation, and we were all given t-shirts with butterflies on it just to accentuate the point. And we were all called together at a town hall meeting where the CFO explained to us over the period of an hour what was going to happen, how important it was, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the members of my team, a gentleman by the name of Tony, at the end of the hour, turned to me and said, "Larry, that's an hour of my life I'll never get back." Clearly, Tony was not inspired by the vision of what was going on. And I see this in so many organizations, that in so many organizations, the vision is thrust upon the people and it comes from the top down. And I don't know how many of you are fans of Mel Brooks movies, but being an aficionado of the fine arts, I'm a big fan of Mel Brooks movies. One of my favorites is The History of the World Part 1, and we've been waiting for 40 years for Part 2, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon.
Right.
But in History of the World Part 1, there's a scene where Mel Brooks plays Moses, and he's descending from the mountaintop, and he's carrying 3 tablets, and he goes to the people, he says, "Here are your 15, oops, he drops one, your 10 commandments." And that's the way most organizations roll out a vision. Is it comes from on top, where the people go off site to come up with this vision, and then they kind of impart it to the rank and file, hoping that people are going to get excited about it. And 9 times out of 10, people aren't particularly excited about it. And the reason they're not is because they don't see themselves in that vision. Mm-hmm. They don't feel that they were a part of creating that vision or a part of owning that vision. They don't see that vision tied to what makes them tick as human beings. You know, one of the things that's really important as we move forward as leaders, especially with this new generation of millennials, is that there is no separation between work life and personal life. There's just living your life. And they want to do something that's mission-based. They want to do something that's principle-based. They want to feel like they're making a difference in the world. And they want to feel that what they're doing resonates with their principles, and it's tied to what makes them tick as human beings. And that's so critically important. The other thing that's critically important is for people to see the linkage between what they do and how it brings the vision to life. And when I started at the USTA, my people were demoralized, to put it mildly. They had been told that they would outsource all of IT a year ago and had not been able to do it, so they were kind of just sitting around on death watch, waiting for the Grim Reaper to show up. And they had no idea on how the work they did was tied to the vision and the mission of the USTA. And one of the people I met, a gentleman by the name of Pete, and I asked Pete what he did for a living. And for those of you who are not technologists, when I asked him, he didn't even give me a word, he gave me an acronym. I said, "Pete, what do you do for a living?" He said, "SQL." And for those of you who are not technically based, SQL is basically a database language. So that's what Pete thought he did for a living, because that's the only frame of reference he had about his job. Well, very quickly, I started getting my people out into the field to see that what we were doing, how it was impacting the vision of the association. And I sent Pete to sit at a tournament desk with the tournament director to see how our technology was being used to drive participation in our tournaments, to help match play, to help getting the scoring in, etc. And he came back with dozens of great ideas on how we could do this better to support the tournament directors. And when I left 15 years later, if you ask Pete what he did for a living, he didn't say SQL. What he would tell you is he was growing tennis participation in the United States. Because one of the things we were able to do was help the people on the team understand how what they did was tied to the vision of the organization and helping to drive the mission of the organization.
And I like what you said too. It's more than about just telling him. You actually sat him down and showed him. And he got to see it, and that probably gave him more ideas than you could have given him in a week.
Absolutely. We wanted to make this real for people. We wanted them to see how the work they were doing translated into the real world at a grassroots level. And the other thing that that accomplishes, Peter, is that it creates a sense of ownership for that vision. Because if people feel that they've contributed to that vision, they're a part of that vision, and they understand how the work they do can help drive that vision, now there's a sense of accountability and ownership for that vision. So it stopped being Larry's vision, and now it became our vision, where everybody had skin in the game, and that drives up the amount of investment people have, both emotionally and from a passion and effort perspective, to drive that vision's success. So everything starts with a vision, and it's so critical that our people are linked to that vision and see themselves in that vision. Now, for those of you who remember when Clinton ran for president, and that, by the way, that's Bill, not Hillary. When Bill ran for president, his tagline was, "It's the economy, stupid." It's interesting how all these years later, we're kind of back in the same soup all over again. Things tend to be cyclical. But when it comes to the work we do in our organizations, my tagline is, it's the business, stupid. Because people aren't giving us money because of our charming personalities and good looks. And certainly in my case, that's clearly the case, right? In IT, I always love it when people think that technology is cool. Well, nobody ever gave you millions of dollars of budgets or dozens of people in headcount because technology was cool. They gave me millions of dollars because they expected technology to drive business outcomes, okay? And a lot of organizations are looking at what they do and trying to align with the vision. And I think alignment is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard, because alignment assumes that there's two things. There's the core business, and then there's the function you're associated with, and somehow those two things have to marry together. You don't need to be aligned with the business. You need to be integrated into the very fabric of the business. And one of the things I did when I started at USTA was to make sure that my people sat with the business, ate lunch with the business, were in their meetings, were basically proxies for the business, so that they were viewed as an extension of the business. And the only reason anybody knew that they were part of IT was because they were on my payroll. But other than that, they were part of the organic aspect of the business, and people wouldn't think of doing something without them any more than they would think of doing something without someone who's responsible for operations or finance, because they were core and part of the fabric of that business. And in seeing what we're doing and in making the decisions on what is a priority, and we'll talk about this in a minute, we'll actually go through an exercise in a minute to do this. I've got 3 questions for you. The questions are, what outcomes as an organization are we striving for? What truly matters to the business? And in a minute, I'll go through an exercise with you called the What Matters exercise. So what are the things that we need to accomplish in order for us to be the organization we aspire to be? The second question, how are the things that my team is doing helping us to achieve those outcomes, accomplish that vision for the organization? And the third question is, if our objectives don't support these key outcomes, why in God's name are we doing them, right? We spend a lot of time doing things that sound good in principle, but the good is the enemy of the great. There are only a handful of things that we could do that are difference makers. We need to focus all of our energy on those handful of things and not do the dozens of other things that are ancillary to what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. So understanding the core of what you're trying to accomplish, how your team could help accomplish those objectives, and making sure that you're putting all of your horsepower, your human capital and your financial capital behind those things is critical to accomplishing that vision. So let me just take a quick stop there before we move forward to see if there's any comments or questions people would like to share now before we move forward.
Well, we're doing that. I mean, I guess as you say that, it sounds as easy as it probably is. But if you're not working in that way, then you've got everybody rowing on one side of the boat, and we know what happens to the boat if that happens.
Well, my first book that came out about 10 years ago called Lessons in IT Transformation. My second book just came out last weekend. My first book in the foreword, I said that what you're going to read in this book may sound like common sense, but unfortunately my experience has been that common sense is not always common. So it's not that we don't know what to do, but the fact that we know what to do doesn't mean that we're doing it consistently and executing against that on a consistent basis. So yes, there's no epiphanies here, but are we doing this consistently is the question I would challenge you with.
Good. All right, let's keep rolling.
Yep. So, we're all concerned with metrics, but they have to be meaningful metrics. They have to be metrics that are tied to the outcomes that we care about. IT people love metrics. We love to tell people about 99.9% availability of this service or the other service. And quite frankly, the only people who care about those metrics are the IT people, right? The metrics that matter are the metrics that impact the top line and bottom line. What are we doing to drive revenue? What are we doing to drive participation? What are we doing to drive the experience? What are we doing to drive the bottom line in terms of cost effectiveness and cost efficiencies? So what we really need to look at is, are we leveraging our capabilities as an investment for the organization that's showing dividends and a return on that investment? Or are the things that we do viewed as sunk costs for the organization?
Sure.
If we want it to be an investment, that there have to be some payoffs on that investment and some returns, whether they be driving top line revenue, driving bottom line results, etc. So we need to understand what are the key metrics of success that we're using to measure our success as an organization, and how are the things that my team doing accomplishing those outcomes. We also have to be cognizant of how do we engage our key stakeholders like the board of directors? How do we know who these people are, know what makes them tick, know what their agenda is, both individually and collectively, and make sure that we appeal to that agenda. And also that we speak their language. You know, an analogy I often use with my clients when I run workshops is, if someone gave you an opportunity to run all of European operations out of France, and you packed up your family and packed up all your belongings, and you kind of took an airplane and flew into Charles de Gaulle Airport in France, when you walked off that airplane, would your expectation be that the entire population of France is learning to speak English to talk to you? And the answer is clearly no. We're in their country now. We need to speak their language. Well, that holds true with our key stakeholders as well. When we're in the boardroom, we need to speak their language, not struggle that they don't understand our language. And their language is the language of finance and the language of business. And we need to translate everything into simple terms that they could digest in financial and business terms.
So that's not too far different than what you were talking about before, in that everybody understanding what the vision of the organization is, and kind of everybody moving in the same direction or helping to move the organization in that direction. Similarly here, look kind of bigger picture. Don't just assume your only audience is the people that sit within 10 feet of you. You better make sure that you're thinking about the right people, the right audience, or to your point, there's no way you can speak their language.
Absolutely. We have to understand what makes our audience tick. And one key audience are the people who subsidize us. I'm very cognizant of the fact that there were people signing my checks and making $1 million investments in my organization. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that those people understood that I understood I had a fiduciary responsibility to the organization to take those investments and turn those investments into value, and to be able to articulate that value to them in terms they understood, in a language they understood.
Yes.
And finally, to do that, we need to make sure that we're focusing on what matters. And what I'd like to do now for the next couple of slides is go through a little exercise I go through with attendees in my workshops that I call the What Matters exercise. And hopefully you might find it, get a couple of chuckles out of it, but more importantly, hopefully it'll kind of shine a light on something that's really important about how we think about what we do and how we need to think about what we do. So the first thing I always do when I run my workshops is I ask two questions that usually get a chuckle from the crowd. I asked the attendees, do you have an unlimited budget? And of course, the answer to that is unequivocally no.
Easy no.
Then I asked them, do you have unlimited headcount? And of course, the answer to that is no as well.
Right.
So then my thought process is, if we have limited financial resources and limited resources from a human headcount perspective, doesn't it make sense to use our limited financial and human resources to do the things that are going to, using football vernacular, move the chains for the organization?
Sure.
So we need to apply the limited resources we have to the things that are going to give us the proverbial best bang for the buck. So my next part of the exercise goes as such. If I woke your CEO up at 2 o'clock in the morning, by the way, not a best practice I would recommend because people tend to be cranky at that hour, okay? But if I woke your CEO up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I asked him or her, what are the 3 to 5 things that your organization needs to accomplish over the next 3 years to become the organization you aspire to be? What would that person tell me those things are? So that's step one. So what I tell my clients to do is take those 3 to 5 things, make sure you know what they are. And if you don't know what they are, find out what they are, either directly from your CEO, or if you don't have access to your CEO, from someone who does. Figure out what those things are, and down a clean sheet of paper, down the left-hand side of that clean sheet of paper, I want you to list those 3 to 5 things that are priorities for your organization. The second thing I want you to do is down the right-hand side of the sheet of paper, I want you to list all of the projects and initiatives that your team is currently involved in. And once you've done that, it's time to draw some lines. And I want you to connect lines from the 3 to 5 priorities on the left-hand side of the page to the activities that your team is working on the right-hand side of the page. And what you're going to find is that things are going to wind up in 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 is that there are things you're absolutely working on that are directly aligned with the corporate priorities, that are directly helping to drive those outcomes. And we need to put as much human capital, as much financial capital, and as much horsepower as we can behind those things, because those are the things that truly matter for the organization. Mm-hmm. The second bucket is that there are a bunch of things that are not directly aligned with those priorities, but we can connect the dots to see that they're associated with those priorities, that in some way they enable those priorities, some way they support those priorities. And while they might not be given the same amount of human and financial capital to back those, we still need to put some attention behind those things. But maybe we need to back them off a little bit so we can put more bandwidth behind the first things. Maybe we need to spend a little less time or push them back later in the year, etc. Then the third bucket are the things that in no way, shape, or form are moving your agenda forward. And my question to you is, why in God's name are you doing this?
If you can't draw a line to one of the three priorities.
You draw a line, they have no association with the things that matter. We just said we have limited financial resources, limited human resources. Why are we wasting them doing these things? And there's a lot of reasons that happen sometimes. Sometimes they're sacred cows, right? There's things we've always done. And we had programs when I was CIO that we always invested money in, and they were accomplishing nothing. They weren't growing tennis participation. They weren't growing fan engagement. And I would challenge my business partners, why are we investing in these things when we could take these investments and put them towards things that are more productive to accomplishing our vision and our mission?
Sure.
The second reason, it could be pet projects. You know, the CEO, this is his or her pet project. Well, respectfully, maybe there's a conversation that needs to be had on why are we doing this, and this may not be accomplishing the things you want to accomplish here. The third reason, and I love this, I get this all the time, is we've always done this, okay? And that reminds me of a quick story of the Easter ham. A little girl on Easter morning sees her mother cutting up the ham before she puts it in the oven, and asks her mother, why are you cutting it up before we cook it? And she says, well, that's the way Grandma always did it. So she goes to her 65-year-old grandmother and asks her, Grandma, why do you cut up the ham before it goes in the oven? She says, that's the way my mother always did it, Gigi, great-grandma. So she goes to a 90-year-old great-grandmother and says, Gigi, why did you cut up the ham before you put it in the oven? She said, well, back in my day, the ovens were too small to fit the ham in whole. We had to cut it up. So people 2 generations later were still doing things for reasons that don't make any damn sense anymore, okay? So the fact that we've always done things this way don't mean that we should continue to do things this way. The other thing that I see a lot in IT specifically is that we do things because we feel we're supposed to do it. A new release of Microsoft Office comes out, so we just automatically upgrade. Well, why? Because somebody in Redmond, Washington said we're supposed to. If there's no additional functionality that our people need, or if there's not end-of-life situation where we can't operate the way we used to, I challenge my people, why are we making this investment where we could be making this investment in something else? So always remember, when thinking about what are we doing and why are we doing it, that the good is the enemy of the great. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of good things we could do, but only a handful of things that truly can raise the bar and help us move the chains to becoming the organization we hope to accomplish.
And I love in the 3 buckets, the third one is a question. There's always time and reason to ask question. And this really forces that, right? Because you may ask the CEO, why are we doing this? And there could be a perfectly logical explanation that you just weren't connecting to the priorities, but it really does exist. Likewise, that CEO may take a look at that and say, you know what? Because we've always done it. And that's the dumbest answer I've given all day.
Oh, and by the way, there are going to be times when the CEO will say, because I want you to do it and I sign your check, and that's a damn good reason for another.
That's a really good reason.
But whatever the case may be, challenging this is really important, because otherwise we find ourselves distracted and doing a whole lot of things that really aren't adding up to a hill of beans.
Yeah, because even if you describe your job as SQL, somebody above you understands what your value should be to the organization. And if you're not delivering, you're spending time, resources, whatever it is, on the wrong things, then you're going to have to answer that. You will have to answer for that later.
Exactly. So that's an exercise that I would recommend that the folks on the call do that with your team. I think you'll find it's a really eye-opening exercise. Now, the great management consultant, Peter Drucker, I have to give him credit because this is his line, culture eats strategy for breakfast every time. And strategy is great, but it doesn't accomplish results unless you have the right kind of culture. And you have to have a team that is empowered. I see too many teams where people on the leaders team are being held accountable for delivering an outcome, but they're not empowered to deliver that outcome the way they're capable or they're wired to do it. So we need to make sure that our people are not only being held accountable, but are empowered to get things done. I often, when I do keynote presentations at conferences, will ask the audience, 100, 150 people, how many of you have subordinates? And they all look at me kind of with a dumbfounded look because they're all leaders. So of course, every hand goes up. And I say to them, I don't have any subordinates because I'm not the coach of my team. I'm the quarterback of my team. Because for your team to succeed and truly get great results, everybody has to be a member of that team and have fully functional responsibility within that team. And the analogy I use, and it kills me to do it because I hate Tom Brady being a Jets fan, I'm actually happy because now he's out of our division.
There you go.
We got Cam Newton in the division, so I'm not sure it's getting much better. Okay, but Tom Brady might be the greatest quarterback of all time, but if his left tackle misses a blocking assignment, Tom Brady finds himself on his posterior, and you can't, complete too many passes if you're throwing from your back.
Right.
The reality is all of us are part of a team, and some of us maybe are the quarterback, so we get paid more than others, and maybe we get more attention when things go well. By the way, we also get more attention when things go poorly.
That's right.
But no matter what role you play, we're only as good as our weakest link, and we all have to play our roles and do our blocking assignments and run our patterns if we want to be successful. So it's not about having subordinates, it's about having teammates, and how do we position our teammates for success. The other thing is I have a lot of people who have a problem with delegation. And I always tell them, if you're babysitting your people, you've got one of two scenarios. Either you've got the wrong people or they've got the wrong leader. Your job as a leader is to make sure that you work with your people, have a clear vision that they buy into and are excited about, that you create support for them and the tools they need to accomplish that vision, that they know what's expected of them, and then you get the hell out of their way and let them execute. Now, if you're there to support them, if there's problems, you're there to be a resource to them. If things go bad, you're there to throw your body on the grenade so that they don't get the shrapnel. When things go well, you're there to make sure that they get recognized and reward for it. But the bottom line is, if you're babysitting your people and you're micromanaging your people, you've got the wrong people or they got the wrong leader. So you got to do something about that.
Well, that's Jim Collins, the other great management consultant. Get the right people on the bus.
Yep. Good to Great, my favorite business book of all time. I always jokingly tell people, if you're going to read 3 books, read Jim Collins' book and my 2. Okay?
There you go.
The other thing is a lot of people treat their partners, treat their vendors like stepchildren. What they're trying to do is squeeze the last penny out of them and make sure they're in an oppositional perspective, yet those people are representing you, they're representing your brand, and you're counting on these people to accomplish your outcomes. So you need to create win-win partnerships with your vendors, because if they're not drinking the Kool-Aid, if they're not buying into the program, they're not excited about being a part of what your team is doing, then you're not going to get the most out of them, and those people represent you. When I sent people to solve a problem, those people didn't know if they had a USTA badge or Pfizer badge or some other company's badge. All they know is that these people were part of Larry's team and they represented my brand. Well, how are they representing my brand, in a positive or negative way? So we need to make our vendors part of our organization and make sure they're excited as well. The same with our clients. We need our clients' goodwill and our clients' collaboration to get anything done in this day and age. Do our clients feel that they're an extension of what we're trying to accomplish, and that everything we're doing is with their best interests in place? I always tell my clients that the only acronym I like as an IT executive is WIFT, what's in it for them. And our entire focus should be on what's in it for them, because if we help our clients succeed and we help our people succeed, all ships rise with the tide. If we're focusing on our own success, we're not going to get very far. For those of you who are married, I've been married for 36 years. When I focus on making Denise happy, my marriage goes great. When I focus on making Larry happy, it's more of a hit or miss proposition. Right? So we got to make sure that our partners feel a part of what we're doing and are excited about it as well. And the same thing with our board and our senior leadership. Do they understand what we're doing? Do they see how what we're doing is there to support their efforts? And they see that our efforts and all the work we're doing is there to make them successful. Because if they see that, they'll be advocates and proponents of our business. They won't be auditors of what we do.
Sure. Well, before we talked about asking them questions about what they need and whatnot, but this is also kind of turning that on its ear a little bit and saying, make sure you're communicating. Make sure you're communicating your value. And I think everybody ought to, think about that. What's the value you're adding? Because if you're not adding value, you may want to consider how you begin to add value, because there's not a lot of places for people that aren't adding value. And if you don't think you are, then certainly somebody else is going to agree.
That's right. They'll be in vehement agreement with you. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And one of the things a lot of my executive coaching clients are either CIOs or CFOs, and they always tell me, I ask them, do you have a communication plan? And they look at me like I've got 3 heads, and they will say kind of tongue in cheek, well, I'll get to communication when I finish with the day job. I don't have the time. To which I say to them, first of all, it's not the icing on the cake, it's the main ingredient of the cake. And I said, the good news is if you keep doing what you're doing, in 6 months, you'll have all the time in the world, because you'll be out of a job if you're not communicating the value you bring to the table.
Right.
And the last thing I want to focus on, and then we'll open it up to Q&A,
sure,
is sustainability. As an individual leader, you can help to drive some short-term progress and kind of move the change a certain amount. But if you truly want to transform an organization and have a culture of success and a sustainable culture, you need to drive that through creating a culture of leadership so that the only leader in the organization isn't you, and it's a house of cards where if you leave, everything folds up, or all decisions are dependent upon your decision-making process. You need to drive culture through every level in your organization, from the individual contributor on up, so that at every level, people know what's expected of them. They know how you play the game. They know how you expect them to play the game. And they're part of they're part of the solution, not part of the problem. And they're making decisions on the fly. They're able to execute without being mother hen because they understand how you expect them to play the game. So as a leader, job one is to create a culture of leadership and success where everybody in your organization understands the rules of engagement, understands how to play by those rules, and is their own leader in their own right, so that all eyes aren't always on you to be the leader. They understand what's expected and they can carry that out with being babysat. And as a leader, our most important goal is to develop leaders throughout our entire organization so that we can determine not just success today, but long-term viability and sustainability of that success. So those are some of my thoughts about focus and prioritization. And I'd love to open it up either via chat or if people want to take themselves off mute, just to talk a little bit about some of what we talked about, how this is playing out in your world, any questions you have, any reactions to the things we shared, anything that you'd like to share with me. So let's open it up to chat and questions, Peter.
Yeah, so one question we got was, as someone that may not be at the top of the pyramid or top of the hierarchy, where do they fit into this conversation and in the focus and prioritization where they may or may not have the pull, if you will?
So one of my mantras has always been leadership begins with me. You know, and one of the things that I was told when I got to USTA by my team was, well, this all sounds great, Larry, but you know, this company is the Titanic. And I said to them, well, it might be the Titanic, but all we could do is make sure that our deck chairs are lined up right. We're going to make sure that our deck chairs look great. Okay. So the bottom line is leadership starts with me. So from my position on down, I don't care. What I told one of my executive coaching clients is, I don't care if your leader is a clown. That does not give you license to join the circus. Okay. So if you are responsible for a certain body of work, make sure that that body of work is working well. Make sure that the people on your team got the right religion, are working the right way. And the interesting thing that happens is when that happens, people start to recognize, hey, something different is going on there. And they start to want to leverage what you're doing. So leadership begins with me. Even if you can't impact everything, you can impact your space. And when you make your space better, things around you tend to get better and people start to take notice of that and ask you if you could have an impact on a broader level.
Absolutely. Yeah. If your bed is made, somebody's going to notice.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's see. Do we have any other questions coming in? We're slow on questions today. This is unusual for our group. So if you got some questions out there, let's get them in here. So here's one. Culture is a word you hear over and over again. So how do you define culture, Larry?
Culture is, to me, that everyone knows what the game is, knows your expectations of how to play the game, and enjoys playing the game and is part of playing the game. So my people, you know, and I don't mean to be sacrilegious, so I hope no one takes it in this way. They used to joke with me years ago. Those of us who are Christians, there would be Christians who would wear these little bracelets with the letter, you know, with the letters that represented what would Jesus do. Mm-hmm. And my people used to joke with me that after working with me for 6 months, they should wear little bracelets that said, "What would Larry do?" The reality was they understood what I expected. They understood how I modeled the right behaviors and expected them to model the right behaviors for their people and beyond. And you know, when faced with a situation, they knew what was expected, how to carry themselves, how to purport themselves, what to do, how to put the customer first, because we created a culture and a dynamic where everybody understood what was expected, how to get it done, where are the people who can help you get it done, and they knew the rules of engagement. The biggest challenge you have, you know, we're going through a situation right now, and I'm not going to be political because that's not what we're here for, but you know, as we go through this pandemic, one of the biggest challenges we have is we have 50 states and everybody's doing something different. So, you know, we stamp out COVID in New York and now it pops up in Florida and Texas, and everybody's taking their own approach to what they think is the right rules. And there's no overarching sense of how do we play this game holistically and, you know, across the board to make sure we ensure success. And in most organizations, I see the same thing, is that everybody's got their own idea of what culture is. Everybody's playing by a different set of rules. So you never get everybody on the same page and you never get maximum effectiveness or efficiency.
Sure, sure. So how important or damaging is conflict conflict within your team or your organization. It's bound to happen. Some people like to initiate it. So how does that play a part?
Conflict is not negative. Avoiding conflict and not acting like an ostrich and putting your head in the sand is what makes it negative. I always told my people, I want to know when there was a problem, but I wanted to know quickly so that we could react to it. Don't tell me the day before something's supposed to roll out that guess what, is 6 months behind schedule. So there's going to be conflict. Conflict does not mean, though, that you have to be a jerk. You should still be professional, you should still be constructive, and you should still deal with people in a professional, respectful way. But you need to put things on the table and work through them, because if you don't, you won't solve problems. If you try to bury problems, problems, unfortunately, are like cancer. If left alone and to fester, they get worse, and something that might have been remediated, attacked early enough, becomes lethal if left alone. Yeah. So you want to deal with conflict, but you want to deal with it productively, constructively, and early in the game. And you want everybody to feel comfortable coming to you with it. What you don't want is a dynamic where people are afraid to come to the manager with bad news because the boss doesn't want to hear bad news. I want to hear bad news, but I also want to hear solutions. So don't just come to my office with problems. Come to my office with problems and ideas on how we can solve those problems. And let's have a spirited discussion about it. And then at the end of the conversation, when we've all agreed to do something, even if it wasn't my way that we agreed on, we're all going to get behind it and push the rock up the hill, even though it wasn't the approach I might have wanted to take. Because once a team has agreed on something, then everybody needs to push the boulder in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely. There were 3 pieces there, and I think all of them hit exactly home for me as well. So do you have any tips for coaching up your boss if he or she doesn't empower their subordinates? Other than sharing your email address with them directly?
So one of the things to do is create a dynamic where you can get things accomplished. So my first boss at the USTA was a lovely woman, but she was a micromanager. And I wanted to send out a monthly report that I called IT Update to explain to people and communicate to people what we were doing with the investment they were making in IT and how it was helping the association accomplish our mission. And she wanted to micromanage every line of the report so that my report always wound up going out a month late. So if it was the June report, people wouldn't see it till the end of July, but she wanted to micromanage it. And after 2 months of this, what I did with her was I sent her the report on a Monday, and I said to her, Sonia, I'm sending the report out this Thursday. If you have any suggestions or comments, please send it to me by Thursday. And when she didn't, I sent it out. And when she said, well, you sent the report out, I said, I gave you a 3-day window. We set the rules of engagement, and you didn't have anything to say, so I sent it out. And that was the last time that ever happened. From that point forward, I just sent it out every month without any feedback from her. So there are ways to kind of rejigger the game, but also you got to be respectful of them and help them understand in a productive way. Listen, my number one client, my number one customer was my boss, right? My job is to make you successful. Here's the concern I have with this approach, not just for me, but for your success. And here's why I'm concerned for your success. Here's why I think if we do it differently, not only will my team be successful, but you will. And I've always got your back. So they're never going to be surprised by anything I do. They're never going to feel that I have another agenda or I'm making an end run around them. They're going to feel that I've got their back and their agenda is my agenda, but I'm also going to help them understand how there might be challenges in the approach we're taking. At the end of the day, they're going to have the final word. And believe me, I did a lot of things that people decided above me that I didn't exactly agree with. And that's life, that's working in corporate America. But at least you have the responsibility of trying to educate them and showing them why there might be a better way. And if you don't do that, then you're not taking your responsibility seriously.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Excellent. Well, we are up on 12:45. So let me switch over to this screen here, and then we'll jump down. Well, I'll go one more ahead. But first of all, Larry, I want to say thank you. Fun topic for me, and it looks like others as well. I enjoyed it. There's some really good pieces in there. I love the 3 buckets. That's going to be something I'm going to keep in my back pocket and utilize when I have the opportunity. And I hope others got some great feedback as well. Of course, we've got more topics coming up, and next week is actually interesting. And it's about building trust and how important that and critical that is. And we just had some of that dialogue here about building trust within your organization, with your manager, with your trustees, with whoever it may be. So join us next week with Celia Slater from True North Sports. She is a former student athlete and former coach, and I always love when we have that combination. That's a fun combination to have. Just it kind of lives in the world where I wish I had lived a little bit more part of my life. But we'll have her, and she'll be talking to us about trust and how important that is to have in your corner and have those skills in your corner. So share the information, not only today's information. We want to make sure you are forwarding this. So you'll get an email in the next 24 hours that shares where to come back and view this again. And we encourage you, even more so than that, go ahead and reach out directly to Larry at your earliest opportunity, get some more feedback. You could certainly reach out to me for information on the webinar, for information about the SMU Sport Management Program, for information about, or just to share another topic you feel like we should be presenting to this group. Snodgrass Partners, as always, is happy to assist as well. They've been really instrumental in putting together this group of people to chat with you. So Larry, let me once again say thank you. It's been great to have you with us. Appreciate the topic, appreciate the time and the content for sure. And with that, I'd just like to say to everybody out there, thank you for joining us. And until next week, be well and be safe. Thanks, everybody.
Take care,
Larry,
everyone.
thank you.
Peter, my pleasure. Take care, folks.